part 2 of the Cadillac picks up, actually, it immediately kind of wraps up the story between Jerry and Elaine, where Elaine was kind of showing a little more interest again in Jerry beyond friendship. Like, she was kind of like really wanting to see him, because obviously she's kind of attracted to him because of how much money he makes. So she calls him while he's trying to sleep, which this episode also had a couple like callbacks, especially in part 2, a couple of like callbacks to material used in previous episodes. Like back in the pen, when Elaine slept on that couch with that bard that really hurt her back. Well, Jerry was sleeping on that same couch. So Elaine calls, and she said she was thinking about maybe coming down to spend time with Jerry and his parents. And Jerry basically tells her, no, I don't think so. In the middle of the phone call, though, George calls, again, begging Elaine to somehow get Marissa Tomei's phone number. How she got the number, I don't know, because especially since, Katie was unconscious in the hospital in the previous episode. But in the middle of it, then Elaine says, fine, I'll do it. And then, of course, she hangs up on him. George did have some scene also where he imagined Marissa like walking around the corner and them start kissing. And then Susan walks in and George was making out with his pillow on the couch. Awkward enough, but it was pretty funny. So all that goes down. And meanwhile, back at the back down in Florida, Jerry finds out that the last person that basically they need to figure out, because right now it's like even up, I think like 3-3, I think it is, or 2-2, as far as like who is for impeachment, who's against impeachment for Morty Seinfeld being impeached, because Jack Klompus, who's super jealous and wants to be president, thinks that Morty stole funds from the condo to get that Cadillac, because nobody believes that Jerry could afford that Cadillac. So the one person they said that has to, be the deciding factor is Mrs. Choate. Now, why does that last name sound familiar? Well, the Seinfelds invited her over to have like dinner with her. She comes over, and it's not just Mrs. Choate. It's Mabel Choate. Who's Mabel Choate? Remember back in the Rye episode? The old woman with the marble rye? Yeah, the same woman who just happened to be in New York lives in the same condo plan as Morty and Helen Seinfeld. And she is the deciding factor if Morty Seinfeld gets impeached or not. So they introduce her to Jerry, and she was saying that Jerry looked familiar. And Jerry realizes who she is and remembers, that incident. And of course, they also mentioned that, oh yeah, Jerry's from New York. You were just in New York. She goes, yeah, I'm never going back there again. Some scumbag stole my marble rye. So obviously, Jerry, not wanting to ruin things for his parents, goes out for a bit while she's there, because she doesn't want her memory to be triggered again, and get his father kicked out of office, basically. So now Jerry has that to worry about. Kramer, meanwhile, is still dealing with that cable guy, trying to get a hold of him, and even it goes as far as they're on the street, and Kramer's on the street walking, and the cable guy spots him, and he starts following him. And it even gets in this big chase scene. They're like running and climbing up, buildings, climbing over fences, like going all over God's creation to try to avoid each other. Finally, of course, Kramer does get farther away, and then of course they realize that once again that he gets away with it once again. But of course, towards the end of the episode, the cable guy finally, bangs on his door, and Kramer won't answer. He says, I know you're in there. He goes, okay, I'm sorry, we did this to you. And instead of saying we'll be there between 9 and 1, there'll be appointments. When I say 11 o'clock, we'll be there at 11. And if we're not going to be there on time, we'll call you, and we'll let you know. I'm sorry. And he starts crying, and Kramer gets out, and he accepts his apology and whatnot. So I guess Cable Boy's good again with Kramer. I don't know. But of course, getting back to Marissa Tomei and George. So first off, besides George, making out with this pillow on the couch, thinking that it's for real Marissa Tomei because he's daydreaming about her. And of course, Susan's getting more and more uncomfortable, thinking George is up to something. So Elaine, I'm not sure how, gets George Marissa Tomei's number. He calls Marissa Tomei, just wants to get a cup of coffee. It's not an actual date, it's a cup of coffee. So, but first though, before they leave, they have to come up with an alibi, George and Elaine, as to, why George is going out Saturdays, because Saturday's supposed to be his date with Susan. So they're trying to think of an alibi. Elaine comes to the idea, you're coming to see, well, first they decide, George's going to see Elaine. But why am I going to see Elaine? Because Susan will, of course, be curious. And Elaine comes up with the idea of, I have to go to the dentist, and I'm very afraid to, so you're just trying to help me not to be afraid. George doesn't like the idea. Then, though, he says, how about we say that Elaine, has a boyfriend, and they're having some relationship problems. To which Elaine was like, okay, well, I have a boyfriend. So they go into details. And it's literally almost the same exact conversation Jerry and George had when they were staking out back in the stakeout episode with that one woman that Jerry met at that party he went to with Elaine. Of course, doesn't want Elaine to know at the time, because that was shortly after they broke up. And then they came up with the idea of Art Vandelay, an importer-exporter. And they're saying, basically they're going to tell Susan that the importer and export, that I guess Art Vandelay is both an importer and exporter, but the, but I guess they're going to say that I guess he's considering dropping the importing and keeping the export, or dropping the export, keeping the importer, whatever, the story was. So that was their alibi. So George does go on meet Marissa in the park. And the funny thing is here's another callback here. George is talking to Marissa. Of course, before he left, Susan got curious and she starts thinking that Elaine is having an affair with George, or George having an affair with Elaine. So she's getting very concerned. But anyways, while he's out, but anyways, in the meantime, George is out with Marissa, and I guess George is telling her about that horse manure stuff that he mentioned to that one waitress at Monk's when he took her out, but she was turned off by it, that she basically made that she had a boyfriend. Well, Marissa was smiling and laughing, having a great time. It was the complete opposite. George was nailing it on the coffin with Marissa freaking Tomei. Of course, though, he's engaged. She was laughing, she had a great time, she was smiling, and George was, very, thrilled by it. Of course, then Marissa says, how is it a guy like you, so bald and so quirky and funny? How is that he's not taken? She's all smiling, and George goes, well, Marissa, you see, the thing is, I'm sort of engaged. And then the smile was like, what? Like, she seemed sad, like she wanted to cry, she was disappointed. And he's, engaged. And then from happy to sad to... She decks George right in the face, grabs her bag, and walks away. Oh, man, George got to go out with Marissa Tomei, and it ends with him being decked in the cheek. And instead of a kiss on the cheek, a deck in the cheek. With a big right hook from Marissa Tomei, the Oscar-winning or Emmy Award-winning actress, whatever the heck she was. But anyways, while George was out, Susan went to Elaine's, which is a little weird to see because back in, which episode was it? The Pool Guy. They kind of established that Susan didn't really fit in well with just Jerry and Elaine without George. So seeing Susan go to Elaine was a little strange. So she came over and flat out asked Elaine, are you having an affair with, is George having an affair with you? And she's like, no, not happening. So, they start, talking, and basically, George's alibi seemed to check out. Until while she was heading out, Susan then turns around and asks Elaine, was George helpful? And I guess she was asking for some more details that George and Elaine didn't really discuss. Like, what does he import and what does he export? I guess Art Vandelay apparently imports chips and he exports diapers. So then they both are fake laughing about it. So then Susan leaves. And then Elaine goes to call the apartment to see if George is there. George was not there. So Susan was back first. George arrived and got back. And Susan said, so, what does Art Vandelay import? And then George goes, matches? And of course, because the stories don't check out, George gets decked in the face again by Susan. And she slams the door in his face. Now, how they made up from that, I don't know. Because then, they're still together for the remainder of the season. But I don't know how they got past that. Or, how, the secret of, okay, who were you really out with? Like, Marissa Tomei never got mentioned. So, I don't know how George and Susan got past that. Who the heck knows? Anyway, so then, of course, getting back to, the final results of the impeachment thing. So things seemed fine. Well, also Morty got ripped on because Jerry didn't want to eat dinner early, so they skipped their early bird at this one restaurant they like to go to at their condo. And then we had them showing up at the restaurant. This is everybody else getting ready to leave, and everybody's getting on him. Oh, Morty, you missed the early bird. I guess it's nice to have all that money to not have to get that discount or whatnot. So then, of course, it goes to, the whole impeachment thing. So, it was basically neck and neck. People were for impeachment, people were against impeachment. So, of course, it came down to the last vote. Mrs. Choate, Mabel Choate, who was against impeachment. So, Morty seemed fine. And then, I guess she overheard Jack say something. Morty was, how did you get that old bag to side with you? And old bag triggered Mabel Choate's memory and made her to remember it was Jerry, Morty's son, who took the marble rye from her. And because of that, she still mentioned that she reversed it to her to being against impeachment. And everybody else was against impeachment. Morty's out. Jack Klompus is president. And because of this also, not only was, Jack out of office, Jack was also kicked out of the condo. And then in the last scene, Jerry, Larry, and any of the other writers, they're all big fans of these history things, JFK or the O.J. Simpson trial, and even the movie Nixon. So the episode ends with the three of them leaving the condo, walking to the Cadillac, playing the music, and it's basically a reenactment of the scene where Nixon's walking out of office, and of course, Helen and Jerry get in the car. Before Morty gets in, he puts the arms up in the air, gets in the Cadillac, and as the dramatic music plays, drives away. And, it was just a reenactment of Nixon, which was, again, pretty funny seeing them reenact that again. But, yeah, part 2 is a little bit more interesting. Again, I especially because of, the callbacks, kind of the alibi of the stakeout, the horse manure story from, the episode, I can't remember which episode it was called now, but the episode wherever, George was talking horse manure to this woman he was trying to, impress, and it didn't work out for him. And then, of course, we have, the bar bed, the bed with, the big bar on it that Jerry slept on in Florida. So, yeah, a bunch of throwbacks. Now, in the next episode, the shower head is going to be, a follow-up from that episode. So we say. So, we'll have to see what happens in the next episode, The Showerhead, which is an okay episode. I definitely, though, prefer the for a couple of the 2 episodes after that, but we'll see. So that is the Cadillac. George, unfortunately, blows it with Marissa Tomei. Again, I don't know how him and Susan made up from that, or what he told Susan in the end, because obviously, his alibi did not check out, so who knows. So, yep, that's my thoughts on the Cadillac, part 2. What are your guys' thoughts on the Cadillac episode in general, both parts 1 and 2? Make sure you leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. Also, I gotta say this. This is not the last we hear about Marissa Tomei in this series. Wait until we get to the last scene in the finale of this season. Oh gosh. If you thought, again, there's been a couple of moments where I said that some of the best George moments. I, for the longest time, thought that the scene back in the Red Dot, wherever George basically said, well, I didn't know sleep with the cleaning lady on the desk was wrong. And, was that wrong? Should I not have done that? Was, a pure George moment. I think the moment at the end of season 7 topped it off. What is that? I have a little bit of ways to go, but we will find out next. So until then, guys, what are your thoughts on this? Make sure you leave thoughts down in the comment section below. And make sure as always to slap a like on the video. Subscribe for more content on my channel. Follow me on Twitter as well, at DemandAir193. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your night. Peace out, everybody.